Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP. And there are these insects that are buzzing around me, so I'm not going to be doing this for long. I just want to show you guys the heather over there. Very beautiful. Unfortunately, I'm wearing a red shirt, which doesn't really fit with my surroundings, but okay. I wanted to talk about some books that I read during August, or rather that I listened to on audiobook format. Um, I got, I had to listen to audiobooks on the plane and in, when I was on holidays, so I went quite quickly through quite a few short books. The first one is The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. I would say it's light-hearted, fun play um, that, um, it's not the same as a Portrait of Dorian Gray, but there is this kind of, British humor to it that I like. And I also like that Oscar Wilde and Arthur Conan Doyle are contemporaries, so they kind of write in a similar style. And there is a case. I didn't know that this was going to be, well, it's not a case, but it's like kind of, I think that they're kind of making fun of each other a little bit when they write their stories, like doing a nod to each other, even though I don't think that they were really friends during their lifetimes. Um, but yeah, it's very silly. It's like a satire. Um, and basically it's like a person who pretends his name is Ernest, and then another person pretends that his name is Ernest, and then they pretend that they're like brothers, when really they're just after the same girl, because this girl is just really interested in people who have the name of Ernest. Um, and so yeah, in the end, it's like, yeah, now we know the importance of being earnest, but like, no, everybody's lying the whole time, so they're not earnest. Anyway, the second book I read was The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And I've read Braiding Sweetgrass by her, but Braiding Sweetgrass is long and quite repetitive. And I like this because it was short and sweet. Sorry, I'm moving the flies from the microphone. Okay. Um, so I wrote here in my review on Goodreads that this is a great book about viewing ecology and economy as interlinked. I like the idea of gift economies and that abundance drives our decisions. How sweet it is to see it as robins storing food in the bellies of their brothers. Because when we see things as less of a competition for resources and more of like a gift giving process that keeps going on, then we can see that giving these berries to others is actually that you are actually storing the berries in your brothers, you know? So you give some of the fruit to the birds, and then you give some to your friends and to your family, and there's no need for you to store and hoard these things, you know? So I said this book was short and sweet, just like berries. So I like that. Um, I then read a book called, or a poem book called Goldenrod, which was by a person called Maggie Smith. Not Maggie Smith from the Harry Potter movies. I was disappointed, but okay. But the poems were really good. It was very short. They're contemporary poems written in like the Midwest of the US, I think. Um, and it's talks about the natural world and about emotional landscapes and memories. She also talks about being a parent. Um, I find it quite uh, thought evoking. I'll wait, I'm going to just get a quote. So the first quote is, "What is home but a passage I'm writing and underlining every time I read it?" Which, wow, like, it really caught me because, like, when I was reading this or listening to this audiobook, I was on the plane. So I was thinking of, like, going home. Another one is, "The body remains a house unaware of its rooms," referring to how babies don't know themselves, but we still don't know ourselves as adults. And another one is let us talk more about how dark the beginning of a day is, which is basically about celebrating the night and darkness in all of us. So then I read The Sign of Four by Arthur Conan Doyle, and this one only got 3 stars out of me. I said, I love the Sherlock series, but this one has not aged well, to say the least. The racism pretty much is the whole plot, and the sexist reasonings around Watson's marriage are quite a lot. Also, these retellings and flashbacks kind of drag on. I find that Arthur Conan Doyle actually is better at doing short cases rather than like long stories. I think that his Study in Scarlet was also very long. The whole Mormon part of that was, I don't know, he could have just like made a case short. I didn't really care about anything that happened after the case, you know, because after the case he starts talking about how everything that led to this point. And it's like, yeah, just give me the case, you know. There's also so I do like that BBC Sherlock like incorporates the different cases, the different books of Sherlock Holmes in different episodes. And I'm glad that they made Mary more modern and Sholto as well. These characters into a more palatable story. Because to be honest, basically John Watson finds out that Mary might, you know, that he's in love with, is going to inherit this huge treasure. But then he goes into this kind of existential crisis of like, or identity crisis or whatever, of like, oh, but I cannot marry her because she would be richer than me and I am only on a army doctor's pension. And so then when she doesn't get the treasure, then he's like, oh, yay, that means that I can marry you. So, like, I know that that's how it was at the time, I guess, but like, it's such a big, important part of the plot of the story that, yeah, it does kind of annoy me. Anyway, I also, like I've said here, how put off Sherlock Holmes is by the upcoming wedding and how petty Watson is regarding Sherlock's deduction skills, which yeah, is kind of funny how they make fun of each other and how their real emotions come through. But yeah, it was racist to the extreme. Like I could barely listen to it, so I kind of zoned out at a lot of points. But yeah, it's not good. Like everything that you could do wrong in terms of racism was in there. So yeah, I don't even know why I put 3 stars. I just felt guilty of, you know, saying that I love the Sherlock series and then like giving it less than 3 stars. But yeah, it wasn't good. Then I read or listened to the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes, which is the last book of Sherlock Holmes. That was published in 1927, I think. So it was way later than all of this. And at that point, Arthur Conan Doyle was like really tired and wanted to retire and stop with Sherlock writing. But actually, some of his best quotes, some of Sherlock's most iconic quotes, are in his last book, in his last casebook. And in the casebook, there are 2 cases that are actually narrated by Sherlock Holmes himself, rather than by John Watson. And yeah, you can tell, like, the narration of the voice, that John Watson is really central to the narration of the stories, because Sherlock just doesn't do it as well, you know? He needs he needs his author friend to help him out. But yeah, we're going to go to that review. So this one got 4 stars instead. Some stories are better and some are worse. Sometimes I zoned out, okay, but I enjoyed certain classics, especially those that are well known, that appeared in the BBC version. And there was a lot of quotes that were interesting. Gyarados is also the Tale of the Three Gyarados is basically a well-known Sherlock Holmes story where basically John Watson gets like stabbed, but actually it's Sherlock who gets stabbed, and Sherlock is just so distressed by the fact that John Watson might be hurt that he goes like, for God's sake, like, Watson, are you hurt? You know, for God's sake, please tell me you're not hurt. And then Watson says it was worth many wounds to see the care in Sherlock's in Holmes's eyes, you know, and so he could tell that they care for each other, and that has been redone in many ways, you know. And so I think that was the most important out of these. I also wrote here, as a doctor, I enjoy the slightly medical parts with leprosy and jellyfish. Okay, so one case is basically, not to spoil too much, but one of the cases is basically, okay, well, he got stung by a jellyfish. That was the grand deduction, which is so silly. And then there's another one where they think that a person has leprosy, but he actually has this other skin condition, like the Tale of the Blanched Soldier or something. And then I wrote, there is some racism, but better than The Sign of the Four, as it does not carry the entire plot. Also, that audiobook was a clean version. They basically edited the worst part of it out. So I'm glad for that, because there still is some not great portrayals of Black people and people from other countries. I think they talk about gypsies, that kind of thing. So better, not the best. I would still say that The Hounds of Baskerville is the best out of those I've read so far. I do want to get to, you know, the Reichenbach Fall and the, you know, the Final Problem and those, but we haven't gotten there. The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes is what I want to read next. And then, you know, so there are 9 books, and I think I've read 4. Yeah, something like that. So I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, I read Laziness Does Not Exist by Devon Price. Unfortunately, I did not like it. And I'm disappointed, because I really like Unmasking Autism. That was written later, but I find Laziness Does Not Exist. Though I agree with the premise, I find that the writing of it is problematic. I should have given that first The Sign of Four 2 stars, because I gave Laziness Does Not Exist 2 stars. I don't know how you change these things in Goodreads. Goodreads is pretty primitive, and like, it doesn't allow you to change things really easily. But it's what I have to work with. So sorry for my slowness in changing page. It's very slow. But we're going to look at my review, because I think it will talk better than, you know, just me talking off the cuff. I'm sorry for everybody who liked this book. I have some issues with it. And I wrote like this. I really wanted to like this, as I loved Unmasking Autism. I support the premise of that laziness does not exist, but by the end of the book I was less persuaded on that point than I was at the start. The beginning was good, describing the laziness lie and how productivity does not equal worth, which very true. And I think that Devon Price, with his essay is was one of the first people to talk on the subject. I wrote, Devon talks about how much pressure people put on themselves and how everyone has their own issues that can look like laziness. He even goes into the Puritan foundations of the concept, which I really appreciated. You know, you can't write about the concept of laziness without talking about the Puritan origins. However, about a third into the book, the topic changed to other demands from society and, very US-centric, anecdotes about his workaholic friends. Like, I'm sorry, but nobody is considering these friends to be lazy except themselves when they are working 80-hour work weeks. I find it horrifying that this is presented as a norm in the US. Hopefully it is not the case, but maybe not. And Devon just surrounds himself with busy friends. Devon also seems to get worked up about the internet a lot, which even as a chronically online person, I did not relate to. You know, yes, I get stressed out about like comments on my YouTube channel and you know, comments on the internet, but I don't get that worked up as Devon seems to do. I think that this book was written during 2020, so to be fair, maybe he wrote it during lockdown, and that was like when we were at our worst chronically online phase because we couldn't go out. But okay. This book is also quite hypocritical, as it talks about some behaviors as okay and others not, creating another moral standard that might be just as rigid as our current society. For example, they talk a lot about it being okay to not do as much activism, while also saying that we should focus on what gives us meaning, such as activism. I feel lazy due to not being engaged in activism, but even assumes the reader already is and needs to cut down on those activities. Even uses exercise to relax, but never acknowledges that a lot of people say not exercising is laziness. So which is it? Through this logic, laziness does exist, but in a different form than how Devon conceptualizes it. Also, the whole Ethan situation is really one-sided. Okay, so basically, Devon had a friend called Ethan, and Ethan, basically, Devon cuts off Ethan because Ethan uses Devon, like, is trauma dumping or oversharing or whatever with Devon. And I wrote this. The whole Ethan situation is really one-sided. From the story, it seems Devon never put up any boundaries until Ethan was really drowning, before cutting him off entirely for not going through a list of therapists. Like, I understand Ethan should at least try out professional help and not lean on Devon entirely, but Devon seems to label Ethan as lazy to justify cutting him off with no warning. So basically he's saying like, oh, so Ethan is not trying to help himself, so, you know, so I will just cut him off. Which, okay, true, that is a possible thing, but that doesn't disprove the existence of laziness, you know, because you're kind of pointing a finger at Ethan and saying that he's lazy for not seeking therapy. You know? Well, we don't know enough about Ethan to understand, like, what is his reasoning for not going to therapy, or what are the actual demands that he has placed on, like, what boundaries did he transgress. So I also kind of, you know, relate to the Ethan story from Ethan's side, because I had a friend who cut me off for for struggling with my mental health. And I don't know. I wouldn't say that I was being lazy because I had or at least according to Devon's definition of laziness, or the fact that laziness does not exist, is that there is always a reason why somebody is not doing something. And so for me, there was a reason why, you know, I wasn't doing it, because I'd been traumatized by therapy, and also because I did not have access to therapy. So I think that I wrote this. I think some of the book is colored by Devon's autism. And I think that while ableism is mentioned, Devon never talks about how neurodivergent people can seem lazy due to executive functioning differences, and how to acknowledge and manage that. Overall, I support that our worth is not linked to our productivity. I think the capitalistic lens or psychological lens could have been explored more. Instead, we got some disorganized thoughts about how we should let go of all demands, regardless of our situation or boss, and instead force, in parentheses, demand, ourselves to do more relaxing activities. The books should have been max half the length. That was my hot take, okay? So sorry for any Devon Price fans. I did like his book about unmasking autism, but yeah, if you can't write a book that's called Laziness Does Not Exist and create another definition of laziness, you know? Now we're going to get to my last books here. Okay, this one is actually Self-Care for Autistic People by Dr. Megan Neff. It only got a 3-star rating. Unfortunately, I had it as an audiobook and not as a workbook. So yeah, I wrote like this. I'm sorry that this gets a low rating, but to be honest, I didn't learn anything new from this book, apart from possibly the object focus versus person focused communication. Topics were presented very surface level, and it felt like jumping from subject to subject like a list. I'm someone who has done tons of online research into autistic experiences. Maybe I just knew too much to enjoy this, even though I would probably recommend this to someone new to autism. It does go through many aspects of the autistic experience in a true manner and is very neurodivergent affirming, which is rare. I enjoy Dr. Neff's blog and her videos, but I think the books lack some spark. Maybe this book is bagged only as an audiobook and it has better visual grasps that could be helpful. There are some that you can find online, but not the whole thing, right? So, and then I got a better workbook that is called the Neurodivergence Skills Workbook for Autism and ADHD by Jennifer Kemp and somebody else. Let me just see. And Monique Mitchelson, and both of them are MPsych. And I gave this a 5-star review. Okay, so there was a big difference here. It's the subtitle is Cultivate Self-Compassion, Live Authentically, and Be Your Own Advocate, the Social Justice Handbook series. I wrote this. This is the best autism and self-help book I have read. I unfortunately only had this as an audiobook subscription format and had to rush through it. I would have loved to write down and delve deeper through the exercises. It is very validating to neurodivergent people and offer tips that I have not seen in any other book and, perhaps wrongly, never received in therapy. I like the part of unmasking and self-advocacy most, and the exercises in self-compassion really made me reevaluate my relationship to myself and others. So I think that this was good because it didn't focus too much on like the deficits of autism or ADHD, and they didn't even really go into autism and ADHD. It went into deeper therapy, you know, and a compassion-based therapy and ACT therapy, and that is precisely the kinds of things that I'm looking for because we don't have anything specific for autism and ADHD. So I like that it made me think on different, tales that I have been telling myself, different ideas I had on myself and how I can break out of that. So I really love it. I would recommend this to any person who is diagnosed late in life. I think that there is something for anyone, and they go into a lot of detail. They even go into like pathological demand avoidance and how to work through that. I think that it was the most comprehensive. It doesn't go very deep into each subject, but it does go through a lot of subjects that are rarely discussed in these other books. So really go and check that out. Now, I think that we've gone through all of those books. I also read a queer history or something, which is a graphic novel, which I'll do a separate video on. And I also am now in the process of listening to the audiobook of the second Proust book of À la recherche du temps perdu, In Search of Lost Time. The second book is Du côté des jeunes filles en fleurs or something. I don't know exactly the title. I'm enjoying it. I love the first book, Proust. I find it so poetic. I did wish I had a physical copy, but like I had this audiobook subscription that was unlimited, so I really feel like I have to do the best out of it before it runs out. Um, Tell me what you guys think. Have you been reading any books lately? Is there any? Do you have any other opinions on the books that I have read? Um, I have a lot of books waiting. I took out the book The Wheel of Time, which is a really chunky book. I don't know if I'm going to start it or if I'm going to read other books beforehand. I need to finish up the second Proust book, which is going to take me a long time. So yeah, have a great day, everybody. Bye.